Disclaimer: this is a fictional dramatization created for artistic, emotional, and educational storytelling purposes. All characters and events are entirely fictional and created using AI tools. No impersonation, misrepresentation, or harm is intended. The content contains scenes of danger involving child characters. However, no real persons or minors were involved in its production. Grace's Love Stories produces scripted, AI-generated stories that promote, entertain, inspire kindness, and emotional connection. We respect our viewers and strictly adhere to YouTube's policies.
The first contraction hit me like a wall of burning glass, fracturing every thought into shards of pain. I bit down on the leather strap I'd fashioned from an old belt, tasting the salt of my own tears as they mixed with the metallic tang of blood in my mouth. Outside my small cabin, the autumn wind howled through the trees. A hollow, mournful sound that only amplified my isolation. "Breathe," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible over the storm. "Just breathe, Elena." The pack had left me here 3 days ago. Left me to birth my child alone, without protection, without the traditional circle of female wolves who would normally surround an omega during labor. But I was no longer worthy of their traditions. No longer part of their world, rejected, cast out, forgotten. My hand trembled as I reached for the worn silver locket around my neck, my mother's final gift before she died. Inside was a small sketch of a crescent moon, faded now with age and touch. She had whispered to me once, when I was still a child, that sometimes our greatest strengths hide in our deepest wounds. I'd never understood what she meant, not until now, when everything had been stripped away from me. Another contraction ripped through me, and I clenched my teeth to keep from screaming. The cabin walls seemed to pulse with each wave of pain, the dim lantern light casting long, grotesque shadows that danced like demons across the rough-hewn floor. Then I heard it. A sound that wasn't the wind, wasn't my labored breathing. Footsteps. Heavy and deliberate, approaching my door. The wolves had returned, but not to help me. They had come to make sure I died. I tried to rise, to find something to defend myself with. But my body betrayed me as another contraction hit. The door burst open, and cold air swept into the room, extinguishing my lantern and plunging the cabin into darkness. I could see only a massive silhouette against the stormy sky, broad shoulders, imposing height, the unmistakable presence of an alpha, but not my alpha, not from my pack. This was someone else entirely. The scent hit me then, pine and smoke and something wilder, something that made my wolf instincts both cower and awaken. The rival alpha of the Eastern Territories, the one they called the Shadow Walker. The one whose name was whispered with both fear and respect, Damien Nightshade. "They left you to die," he said, his voice low and rough, like stones dragged across velvet. Not a question. A statement of fact. I wanted to appear strong, to show no fear, but another contraction crashed through me, and I couldn't stop the whimper that escaped my lips. I hated my weakness in front of him, hated being seen this way. Vulnerable, broken, abandoned. "Leave me," I managed to gasp between breaths. "Just let me die with dignity." He stepped closer, and in the faint moonlight filtering through the windows, I could finally see his face, angular and severe, with eyes that gleamed like amber in the darkness. A long scar ran from his temple to his jaw, evidence of battles fought and won. His dark hair was damp from the rain, falling in untamed waves around his face. Dignity? Something flickered across his features. Anger, perhaps, though not directed at me. "There is no dignity in what they've done to you, little Omega." Before I could protest, he was kneeling beside me, his large hands expertly checking my pulse, my temperature. No alpha in my memory had ever touched an Omega with such clinical precision, such absence of disgust. In my pack, we were tolerated for breeding, for our rare ability to soothe the more volatile wolves during the blood moon, but never treated as equals, never touched without purpose. "The baby is coming," he said, his voice softer now but still commanding. "And you're too weak. You've lost blood." I turned my face away. shame burning through me hotter than the pain. Then go. No one asked you to witness my failure. His hand caught my chin, turning my face back toward him. His touch wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel either. It was steadying, demanding my attention. Is that what they told you? That this was your failure? His eyes narrowed, something dangerous shifting behind them. That being abandoned while carrying new life was somehow your doing. I couldn't answer. The story was too humiliating, too raw. How I had believed the pack alpha, Thorn, when he'd claimed me as his during one desperate moon-drunk night. How I had carried his child while he took another as his true mate, then denied my child was his. How the pack had turned against me when I refused to terminate the pregnancy, seeing me as a threat to the new alpha pair's bloodline. Another pain racked my body, and this time I couldn't hold back the scream. Something was wrong. The baby was positioned incorrectly. I could feel it. The rival alpha must have sensed it too, because his expression darkened. Listen to me carefully, he commanded, shrugging off his leather jacket and rolling up the sleeves of his black shirt. I'm going to help you birth this child, and then I'm taking you both back to my territory. What? I gasped, trying to process his words through the fog of pain. You can't. I already have. He cut me off. The moment I crossed this threshold, I claimed you. By pack law, you're under my protection now. Why would you... Another contraction stole my words. His eyes met mine, steady and unreadable, because no wolf deserves to be left to die like this, not even a rejected Omega from a rival pack. There was more to it than that. I could sense it in the way he positioned himself between me and the door, in the territorial growl that rumbled in his chest when the wind carried scents from my former packlands. But I had no time to question his motives. The baby was coming now, ready or not. The next hours blurred into a haze of pain and strange intimacy. The rival alpha never faltered, never showed disgust. He worked with methodical precision, heating water, tearing sheets for clean cloths, supporting my back when I needed to push. His hands, capable of violence I'd only heard whispered tales about, were shockingly gentle as they guided my child into the world. When the first cry pierced the cabin, strong, defiant, alive, something broke inside me. Not pain this time, but a flood of fierce, protective love, unlike anything I'd ever known. Damien placed the tiny, squirming bundle against my chest, and I looked down into the face of my daughter. She had wisps of fair hair, just like mine, but her eyes, when they briefly fluttered open, held a golden gleam that marked her as something special. She's strong, Damien said, and I heard something unexpected in his voice. Not just approval, but wonder. Like her mother. I almost laughed through my tears. Strong. I was cast out, left to die. And yet here you are, still breathing, still fighting. His hand brushed back a strand of my pale hair that had stuck to my sweat-dampened forehead. It was such an intimate gesture that it startled me more than his earlier clinical touch. That's the only kind of strength that matters in this world. He stood then, moving toward the door and looking out into the night. The storm was passing, leaving behind a crystalline clarity to the air and a sky studded with stars. When he turned back to me, his expression had hardened into something resolute. "Can you travel?" he asked. I looked down at my newborn daughter, then at my own weakened body. "I don't think... They'll come back at dawn," he interrupted. "Not to help you. To make sure neither of you survive the night. A half-alpha child with Omega blood is an abomination in their eyes. A threat." Fear clutched at my heart, not for myself, but for my daughter. I tried to sit up, ignoring the pain shooting through my exhausted body. "How do I know you won't do the same?" I challenged him, my voice stronger than I felt. Why would a rival alpha protect an Omega and a child that aren't his? His eyes flashed with something primal, and for a moment, I glimpsed the wolf beneath the man. Powerful, dangerous, but controlled by an iron will. "Because I know what it's like to be discarded," he said, each word measured and weighted with truth. "And I protect what's mine. I'm not yours," I whispered. Even as something inside me, my Omega nature, perhaps, responded to his claim with a treacherous warmth. A smile ghosted across his lips, transforming his severe features for just a moment. "You are now, by the oldest laws of our kind. I found you abandoned. I helped birth your child. I claimed you both under the witness of the moon." He nodded toward the window, where moonlight now streamed in, bathing us all in silver. "Not even your former alpha can challenge that claim without risking war between our packs." War. The word hung between us, heavy with implications. What was I to him that he would risk so much? Before I could ask, he was moving again, gathering what few belongings I had worth taking. He wrapped my daughter and me in thick blankets, then lifted us both with unsettling ease. "My pack is different from yours," he said as he carried us toward the door. "Omegas are rare, valued, protected." I didn't believe him, couldn't believe him. In my experience, all alphas were the same, domineering, selfish, cruel when it suited them. But as he stepped out into the night with me cradled against his chest and my daughter tucked safely between us, I realized I had no choice but to trust him. At least for now. At least until I was strong enough to run, if running became necessary. The forest opened before us, dark and unknown, but somehow less terrifying than the cabin I was leaving behind. Damien moved with confidence, his stride never faltering despite his burden. My daughter slept peacefully, unaware of the momentous journey she was undertaking on her first night in the world. As we crossed the border between territories, I felt a strange sensation, like invisible threads snapping, old bonds breaking. My connection to my former pack, already weakened by rejection, dissolved completely. In its place was nothing. A void. Freedom, perhaps, but also a terrifying emptiness. Damien must have sensed my distress, because his arms tightened around me slightly. "It passes," he murmured. "The emptiness. It fills again, with new bonds, better ones." I wanted to ask how he knew, how he could possibly understand what it felt like to be cut off from everything familiar, even if that familiarity had been painful. But exhaustion claimed me before I could form the words, and I surrendered to it. My daughter's steady heartbeat against mine, the last thing I remembered before darkness took me. I awoke to unfamiliar scents. Cedar wood, sage, clean linens, and something else. Something unmistakably alpha, but not oppressive like in my former pack. This scent was protective, encompassing the room like a shield rather than a threat. Damien's scent. My eyes flew open. I was lying in a large bed with dark wooden posts reaching toward a high ceiling. Morning light filtered through heavy curtains, casting the spacious room in a warm amber glow. My body felt surprisingly painless. Sore, yes, but the sharp agony of labor had faded to a dull ache. Someone had cleaned me, dressed me in a soft nightgown I didn't recognize. Panic surged through me as I realized my daughter wasn't in my arms. I bolted upright, ignoring the protest of my muscles, searching frantically around the room. "She's here," came a female voice, gentle and reassuring. I turned toward the sound. A woman sat in a rocking chair near the window, cradling my daughter in her arms. She was older, with silver streaking her auburn hair, her face lined with experience rather than hardship. Her eyes, when they met mine, held no judgment, only a warm understanding that momentarily stunned me. "I'm Lydia," she said, rising carefully with my daughter, the pack healer. I instinctively reached for my child, and Lydia placed her in my arms without hesitation. My daughter was wrapped in a clean white blanket, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. I breathed in her scent, checking her over with trembling fingers, relief washing through me when I found her perfect and unharmed. "She's strong," Lydia said, smiling. "Took to feeding well when you were sleeping. Alpha Damien had me stay with her while you rested." I looked up sharply. "Where is he?" "Dealing with the fallout," Lydia replied, her expression growing serious. "Your former pack Alpha sent emissaries at dawn. They're demanding your return." Cold fear slithered down my spine. "They want to kill us." Lydia's eyes hardened, something fierce flashing in their depths. "No one is taking you or your daughter from this pack. Alpha Damien has made that abundantly clear." I found myself staring at her, searching for the disgust or pity I was accustomed to seeing in the faces of higher-ranking wolves. There was none. only a matter-of-fact protectiveness that I couldn't comprehend. "Why?" I whispered, the question that had haunted me since the cabin. Why would he risk war for us? Lydia sat on the edge of the bed, her movements deliberately slow and non-threatening. That's his story to tell, not mine. But I can tell you this. In the Eastern Pack, Omegas aren't viewed as they were in your old pack. Here, the Omega gift is honored, not exploited. My daughter stirred in my arms, her tiny fist escaping the blanket. Her nails were slightly pointed, a sign of her werewolf nature already manifesting. It would make her harder to hide among humans, would mark her as different even among our kind. I tucked her hand back into the warmth of the blanket. "What's her name?" Lydia asked. I hesitated. In my former pack, Omegas didn't name their children until they were accepted by the Alpha, a ceremony that often didn't happen for Omega offspring. Many didn't survive that long. I trailed off, shame heating my cheeks. "She's yours," Lydia said firmly. "You name her." I looked down at my daughter's face, at her fair wisps of hair, so like mine, at the determined set of her tiny jaw even in sleep. The name came to me then, rising from some deep place of knowing. "Luna," I said softly. "Her name is Luna." Lydia nodded approvingly. A powerful name. The moon goddess herself. A knock at the door interrupted us. Lydia rose and opened it, revealing Damien filling the doorframe. He looked different in daylight, no less intimidating, but more controlled, dressed in dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that did little to disguise the powerful build beneath. His eyes immediately found mine, then dropped to Luna in my arms. Something shifted in his expression, a softening so brief I might have imagined it. "Leave us," he told Lydia, who nodded and slipped out with a reassuring smile in my direction. When we were alone, Damien remained by the door, as if giving me space. It was a consideration I hadn't expected. "Your former Alpha sent his beta and 3 enforcers to my borders this morning," he said without preamble. "They claim I've stolen what belongs to their pack." My arms tightened around Luna. "We don't belong to them. They rejected us." "I know." His voice was calm, but I could sense the anger simmering beneath. "I sent them back with a message. You and your daughter are under my protection now. Any attempt to reclaim you will be considered an act of war." I swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing on me. "You shouldn't have done that. I'm not worth—" "Don't!" He cut me off, a growl edging his voice. "Don't finish that sentence." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, stopping at the foot of the bed. "Their rejection of you says nothing about your worth and everything about their ignorance." I stared at him, this Alpha who spoke words I'd never heard from any other of his rank. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he countered. "I know you were willing to die bringing your child into this world rather than submit to their demands. I know you faced labor alone without breaking. And I know—" He paused, something unreadable flashing across his features. "I know what it means to be cast aside for being different." Luna stirred in my arms, letting out a small cry. Without thinking, I loosened the top of my nightgown to feed her. Only when she had latched on did I remember Damien's presence, and heat flooded my face. In my former pack, this natural act would never be performed in front of an Alpha. It would be considered presumptuous, improper. I glanced up, expecting disgust, or at least discomfort. But Damien's expression hadn't changed. If anything, there was a respect in his gaze that made me feel suddenly, strangely powerful. "She needs a name for the protection ceremony," he said. I blinked in surprise. "You'd give her a protection ceremony. But she's not. She's pack now," he stated firmly. "Both of you are." "Her name is Luna," I said, the words coming easier this time. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. "A strong name. Fitting." He moved toward the window, looking out over what I assumed were his pack lands. "The ceremony will be at moonrise tomorrow. It would be beneficial if you attended. The pack needs to see that I recognize you both." I frowned at his back, trying to understand. "Recognize us? As what?" He turned, his amber eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "As under my personal protection. Not just the pack's protection, mine." The distinction was significant, and we both knew it. His personal protection meant no wolf, regardless of rank, could challenge my place or Luna's. It meant resources, security, status. It was more than I had ever expected, more than any Omega in my experience had ever been granted. Why? I asked again, needing to hear his answer. Why would you do this? He was silent for a long moment, his gaze drifting to Luna before returning to me. 25 years ago, another Omega was cast out while carrying a child. She died in the forest, alone. Her child survived, barely. Was found by a rival pack. The implication hung in the air between us, heavy and significant. You, I whispered, understanding dawning. You were that child. He gave a single sharp nod. I was found by the former alpha of this pack, raised as his own. When I proved stronger than expected for an Omega's offspring, he never hid the truth from me, never made me feel lesser for it. His jaw tightened. Not all packs share that enlightenment. The parallels were impossible to ignore. His story and what could have been Luna's fate. What would have been our fate if he hadn't arrived at my cabin that night. So this is repayment? For what was done for you? I asked, trying to understand. His expression darkened. This is justice. Breaking a cycle that should have been broken generations ago. Before I could respond, another knock came at the door. Damien's posture shifted instantly, tension radiating from him as he called, "Enter." A young wolf appeared, barely more than a teenager, with nervous eyes that darted between Damien and me. "Alpha, the patrols report movement at the northern border. 4 wolves. They smell of the western pack." Damien's expression hardened to granite. "Gather the border guard. No one engages without my direct order." He turned back to me as the messenger disappeared. "Stay here. Lydia will remain with you. They won't stop, will they?" I asked, fear tightening around my heart. "No," he answered honestly. "Not until they're made to understand the consequences." He moved toward the door but paused when I called his name, the first time I'd addressed him directly. "Damien." His name felt strange on my lips, powerful somehow. What happens if there's a fight? If someone dies over us? The guilt was crushing, the thought that blood might be spilled because of me, because of Luna. He turned, and in that moment, I saw the full weight of his authority. The mantle of Alpha settled firmly on his shoulders. Then they will have chosen their fate by threatening what's mine. After he left, Lydia returned as promised, bringing food that I barely touched. My mind was too full of Damien's revelations, of the danger that loomed because of his choice to protect us. "He's never told anyone else that story," Lydia said quietly as she took Luna to change her wrappings. "About his mother." I looked up in surprise. "How did you—" "I was there," she explained. "When they found him, a tiny wolf pup, still trying to nurse from his dead mother." Her eyes clouded with the memory. I tried to save her, but she'd been gone too long. All I could do was keep him alive until we got him back to the pack. I watched as she tenderly cared for Luna, her experienced hands gentle and sure. "And no one ever resented him for being an outsider, an Omega's child?" Lydia looked up, something fierce in her expression. "Our former Alpha made it clear from the start. Damien was his chosen successor. Anyone who had a problem with that was welcome to challenge or leave." A small smile touched her lips. Few were brave enough to challenge. None survived who did. The implications of her words sank in slowly. "Damien isn't just strong for an Omega's child, is he?" I asked, pieces falling into place. "He's stronger than pure-blooded alphas. He's the strongest wolf I've ever known," Lydia confirmed. "And not just in body, his control, his mind. He leads differently than other alphas." She handed Luna back to me, her eyes serious. "Which is why you need to understand what it means that he's claiming you both under his protection. It isn't charity, Elena. He doesn't do anything without purpose." Before I could ask what she meant, a commotion erupted outside. Shouting voices, growls, the sounds of confrontation. Lydia moved to the window, her body tense as she peered out. "What is it?" I asked, clutching Luna closer. "They've come farther than they should have dared," she said grimly. Your former pack. They're at the edge of the compound. I rose from the bed, ignoring the weakness in my limbs, and joined her at the window. In the clearing below I could see them, wolves from my former pack, led by the beta, Victor. And facing them, his stance wide and dominating, was Damien, flanked by his own wolves. Even from this distance I could feel the tension crackling between them, see the hostility in the rigid postures of both sides. This wasn't just territorial posturing. This was the precipice of violence, and it was my fault. My presence here, my child's existence, had brought this conflict to Damien's door. As if sensing my thoughts, Luna began to cry, a sharp, piercing sound that seemed to cut through the tension of the moment. I tried to soothe her, but her cries only grew louder, more insistent. Below, something strange happened. Damien's head snapped up, his gaze finding our window with unerring accuracy. For a heartbeat, our eyes locked. His burning with something I couldn't name, mine wide with fear. Then he turned back to the confrontation, and even from this distance, I could see a change come over him, a new resolve, a deadlier intent in his posture. What's going to happen? I whispered to Lydia, unable to look away from the scene below. Her hand found mine, squeezing gently. He's going to make them understand that some lines can't be crossed, she said quietly, that some bonds, once formed, can't be broken. As I watched Damien face down the wolves who had once been my pack, who had cast me out to die, I felt something shift inside me, not just fear, not just gratitude, but a flicker of something I'd thought long extinguished, hope. The confrontation below ended without bloodshed, though not for lack of tension. Damien's dominance had been absolute, a display of power that sent the Western pack wolves retreating with tucked tails and wary glances. I couldn't hear what had been said, but the message was clear. We were under his protection now, and he would not yield. Hours later, as twilight painted the sky in watercolor hues of purple and amber, a soft knock came at my door. When I called permission to enter, a young woman appeared, perhaps a few years younger than my 24 years, with kind eyes and a hesitant smile. Alpha Damien asked me to bring you these, she said, placing a stack of clothing on a nearby chair. For you and the little one. I'm Sophie. I'll be helping with whatever you need. I eyed the clothes with suspicion. In my former pack, any gifts came with steep expectations. Thank you, but I don't need... It's not charity, Sophie interrupted gently, as if reading my thoughts. Alpha Damien said to tell you that Omegas in our pack contribute in many ways. Once you're healed, you'll find your place. Her smile widened. Besides, that nightgown isn't exactly suited for the protection ceremony tomorrow. Curiosity overcame my wariness. What exactly happens at this ceremony? Sophie brightened, clearly pleased to explain. The entire pack gathers under the moon. Alpha Damien will present you and Luna to everyone, and formally declare his protection. Then each ranking member will acknowledge you both. Her voice softened. It's beautiful, actually. I've only seen one other protection ceremony, for a wolf who saved Alpha Damien's life during a territory dispute. The weight of what Damien was doing settled more heavily on my shoulders. This wasn't just sanctuary. It was status, recognition, things no Omega in my experience had ever been granted. And after the ceremony, I asked, voicing my deepest fear, what will be expected of me, of Luna? Sophie's brow furrowed in confusion. Expected? You'll heal. You'll learn our ways. Luna will grow. She tilted her head. What do you mean, exactly? I couldn't bring myself to say it aloud. The role Omegas served in my former pack, breeding stock during the blood moon, caretakers of young, submissive, silent, invisible until needed, nothing. I murmured, turning away. It doesn't matter. Sophie seemed to understand anyway, her expression softening with something that wasn't quite pity. Elena, our pack isn't like that. Omegas here are valued for their gifts, their empathy, their ability to soothe tensions, their insight. Many serve as advisors, healers, teachers. She smiled. One even runs our trading post in the human town. We don't use Omegas the way some packs do. I wanted to believe her. The ache to trust, to belong, was almost physical. A hollow space beneath my ribs that had been empty for so long. But experience had taught me harsh lessons about hope. "Thank you for the clothes," I said instead of voicing my doubts. After Sophie left, I explored the room more fully. Luna cradled against my chest. The space was larger than any I'd been allocated in my former pack. A master bedroom with an attached bathroom featuring a deep tub I couldn't help but stare at longingly. The windows offered views of forest and mountains beyond, the territory of the Eastern Pack sprawling in all its autumn glory. I found myself drawn to a bookshelf built into one wall, surprised to discover volumes of poetry, history, even some human novels. In the Western Pack, such things were considered frivolous for all but the highest-ranking wolves. Certainly not for Omegas. I was running my fingers along the spines when the door opened without a knock. I tensed, turning quickly, only to find Damien standing in the doorway. His presence filled the room instantly, but not in the suffocating way I was accustomed to from alphas. His power was contained, controlled, a banked fire rather than a consuming blaze. "You should be resting," he said, his eyes moving from me to the bookshelf. "I've rested enough," I replied, unconsciously lifting my chin, and Luna is settled. His gaze shifted to my daughter, sleeping peacefully against my shoulder. Something flickered across his features, too quick to identify. "The books are yours to read," he said, nodding toward the shelf. "All of them." The gesture surprised me. "Thank you," I said quietly. He moved further into the room, and I noticed he carried something, a small wooden box, intricately carved with moon phases and forest scenes. "For the ceremony tomorrow," he explained, placing it on a table. "A gift for Luna." I approached cautiously, shifting Luna to one arm so I could open the box. Inside, nestled on dark velvet, was a silver pendant on a delicate chain, a crescent moon cradling a small star. "It's traditional," Damien continued, "when a child is welcomed into the pack." My fingers hovered over the pendant, not quite touching it. "It's beautiful," I admitted. Then, because I couldn't help myself, "Did you receive one? When you were found?" His expression tightened momentarily. "Yes. Though mine was contested by some." I closed the box gently. "And mine, Luna's, will also be contested. By some," he acknowledged. "Change doesn't come easily to our kind." "Then why risk it?" I asked, the question that had haunted me since the cabin. "Why disrupt your pack's peace for us?" He was silent for a long moment, his amber eyes studying me with an intensity that made me want to look away, but I held his gaze, needing to understand. "Because peace built on injustice isn't peace at all," he finally said. "It's just a prettier cage." The words resonated somewhere deep inside me, touching on truths I'd felt but never dared articulate. Before I could respond, Luna stirred against me, letting out a small whimper that quickly became a cry. Without thinking, I began to rock her, humming a soft lullaby my mother had once sung to me. To my surprise, Damien didn't leave or show irritation at the interruption. Instead, he watched with an almost studious interest as I soothed Luna. "You're good with her," he observed when her cries subsided. I smiled despite myself. "She makes it easy. She's strong. Like her mother." It was the second time he'd said those words, and something in his tone made me look up sharply. There was no mockery there, only a simple statement of what he perceived as fact. "You keep saying that," I said carefully, "but you don't know me." "I know enough," he replied, echoing his earlier words. Then, with a slight shift in tone, "The wolves who came today, they won't be the last. Your former alpha, Thorn, won't let this stand. Not because he values you or Luna, but because he can't allow a challenge to go unanswered." Fear curled cold fingers around my spine. "Then we should leave. Find somewhere else. Somewhere that won't bring conflict to your pack." Damien's expression darkened. "Is that what you want? To run?" "I want Luna to be safe," I answered honestly. "I want her to have a chance at a life better than mine has been." "And you?" he pressed. "What do you want for yourself, Elena?" The question stunned me. No one had ever asked what I wanted. Not in my entire life. Omegas weren't supposed to want. We were supposed to serve, to accept, to endure. "I don't know," I whispered, the truth of it aching in my chest. "I don't know how to want things for myself anymore." Something shifted in Damien's eyes. A flash of anger quickly controlled. "Then that's the first thing you'll learn here," he said, his voice low and fierce. "How to want, how to choose, how to claim what's yours." He moved toward the door but paused on the threshold. "Rest. Tomorrow will be challenging but necessary." His gaze held mine one last time. "No one will take you or Luna from this pack unless you choose to leave. I give you my word as Alpha." After he left, I stood motionless, his words echoing in my mind. How to want, how to choose, how to claim. Foreign concepts to an Omega like me, raised to believe my only value lay in submission. I looked down at Luna, her tiny face peaceful in sleep, and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. For her, I would learn these things. For her, I would be brave. The night passed quietly, with Lydia checking on us periodically. By morning I felt stronger physically, though anxiety about the ceremony knotted my stomach. Sophie returned to help me prepare, bringing a basin of warm water and sweet-smelling soap. "The entire pack will be there," she explained as she helped me dress in the clothes Damien had sent. Soft leggings and a flowing tunic in deep blue, with silver embroidery at the sleeves and neckline. The fabric was finer than anything I'd ever worn. The color richer than Omegas were permitted in my former pack. "You look beautiful," Sophie said, when she'd finished braiding my fair hair with small silver beads worked into the plaits. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, and barely recognized the woman staring back. Still thin from pregnancy and the ordeal that followed, but somehow transformed by the rich colors and careful styling. I looked significant, visible. Luna, too, had been dressed in a soft white gown, the silver pendant from Damien fastened carefully around her tiny neck. "It's time," Lydia announced from the doorway, her expression solemn. Sophie squeezed my hand encouragingly. "Just follow Alpha Damien's lead. He won't let anything happen to either of you." I nodded, gathering Luna close, and followed Lydia through corridors I hadn't yet seen. The pack house was larger than I'd imagined, a sprawling structure of stone and wood, with high ceilings and wide hallways. Nothing like the cramped quarters I was used to. We emerged into the fading daylight, where a path had been cleared through a gathering of wolves, at least 50, maybe more, their eyes all turning to watch our approach. Some expressions were curious, others wary, a few openly hostile. At the end of the path stood Damien, transformed from the man who had visited my room into something more formal, more intimidating. He wore black from head to toe, the only color a silver emblem over his heart, the same crescent moon and star that now hung around Luna's neck. His hair was pulled back, accentuating the severe planes of his face and the scar that marked his temple. Alpha. Every inch of him radiated the power of his position. Beside him stood an older man with silver hair and keen eyes. His beta, I assumed. And on his other side, a woman with dark skin and regal bearing who could only be his second. Lydia guided me forward, and the murmuring of the crowd fell silent as I approached. I kept my gaze fixed on Damien, drawing strength from the steady confidence in his amber eyes. When I reached him, he extended his hand. A simple gesture, but loaded with meaning, offering support, but leaving the choice to take it entirely mine. I hesitated only a moment before placing my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, and I felt something shift in the air between us, a connection forming, tenuous but real. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, for my ears alone. I looked out at the sea of unfamiliar faces, then down at Luna, peaceful despite the crowd. Finally, I met Damien's gaze again. "Yes," I said, surprised to find it was true. As the sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I stood beside the Alpha who had saved us both, poised on the edge of a new beginning I'd never dared to imagine. The protection ceremony began as the full moon rose, bathing the clearing in silver light. Damien's hand remained on the small of my back, a steady presence as he guided me to stand before his assembled pack. "Tonight, we welcome 2 new members," his voice carried effortlessly across the gathering, commanding attention without shouting. "Elena and her daughter Luna, who come to us seeking sanctuary and belonging. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Not hostile, but not entirely welcoming either. I clutched Luna closer, fighting the urge to shrink back from so many watchful eyes. By ancient law and my right as Alpha, Damien continued, I have claimed them both under my personal protection. Their enemies are our enemies. Their safety, our responsibility. Their blood, our blood. From the crowd, a tall wolf with a jagged scar across his jaw stepped forward. His posture was challenging, though he kept his eyes slightly averted from Damien's direct gaze, a sign of respect, albeit reluctant. Alpha, he addressed Damien, his voice carrying the rough edge of someone more accustomed to his wolf form than human speech. The Omega brings the threat of war with the Western Pack. For what gain? I tensed, waiting for anger, for the swift punishment such questioning would have earned in my former pack. Instead, Damien merely nodded, acknowledging the concern without rage. A valid question, Ryder, he replied. The gain is justice. The gain is standing by our principles. We have long believed that Omegas deserve better than the treatment they receive in packs like the Western. Now we demonstrate that belief with action, not just words. Another wolf stepped forward, an older female with steel-gray hair and evaluating eyes. And the child? What is she? The question hung in the air, loaded with implication. I fought the instinct to hide Luna from view, instead lifting my chin and meeting the woman's gaze directly. She is mine, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. Born of my body, nurtured by my heart, that is all that matters. Damien's hand pressed slightly firmer against my back, support, not restraint. The child shows signs of alpha lineage, he stated matter-of-factly, combined with Omega blood, a rare combination, with potential we can only imagine. His gaze swept the gathering. Is that why the Western Pack fears her? Is that why we should? No one answered, though the tension in the air shifted perceptibly. Luna will grow among us, protected and valued, Damien continued. Her nature, whatever it may prove to be, is a gift, not a threat. Not to those who stand on the side of justice, his amber eyes intense in the moonlight. Elena, do you freely accept the protection of this pack and pledge to honor its ways, to contribute to its strength, to stand with us against all threats? I swallowed hard, aware of the weight of the moment. This wasn't just ceremony. It was binding, a new oath to replace the bonds that had been severed with my former pack. I do, I said, my voice clear despite the emotion tightening my throat. I accept your protection and pledge myself to this pack's welfare. Luna and I will honor your trust in us. Damien nodded once, satisfaction gleaming in his eyes, before turning back to the gathered wolves. The ceremony of acceptance requires the acknowledgement of all ranking members, he announced. Who among you accepts Elena and Luna into our pack, under my protection? Lydia stepped forward immediately. I, pack healer, accept them both. Her smile was warm, genuinely pleased. The silver-haired Beta was next. I, Beta Julian, accept them. One by one, the ranking members came forward. The second, the lead enforcer, the head of hunting, the pack's ambassador to humans. Each stated their acceptance, some more enthusiastically than others, but none refused. I stood straighter with each acknowledgement, a foreign feeling blossoming in my chest, recognition, value, belonging. When the last ranking member had spoken, Damien raised his voice once more. It is done. By moon and blood and pack law, Elena and Luna are now Eastern wolves, protected, respected, one of us. His gaze hardened as it swept over the assembly. Let any who challenge this step forward now. Silence fell, absolute and tense. No one moved. Then it is settled, Damien concluded. He turned to me, taking Luna gently from my arms, a gesture that startled me with its unexpectedness. He lifted her toward the moon, her tiny face illuminated in its glow. Luna of the Eastern Pack, he declared, daughter of Elena, under my protection until you are strong enough to stand alone. He lowered her carefully, placing a solemn kiss on her forehead, before returning her to my arms. Welcome home, little wolf. The formality of the moment dissolved, as wolves came forward to greet us properly, some merely nodding acknowledgement, others offering genuine welcomes. Lydia remained close, a buffer between me and any who seemed too curious or intense. I noticed Damien watching from a slight distance, his expression unreadable as he observed the pack's reaction. Later, as the gathering transformed into a celebration with food and music around a massive bonfire, I found myself seated at a table of honor beside Damien. Luna slept peacefully in a small basket cushioned with soft blankets, undisturbed by the revelry around us. "You did well," Damien said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Many expected you to cower." "You proved them wrong." I glanced at him, surprised by the observation. "I've had practice hiding fear." Something darkened in his expression. "That's a skill you shouldn't need here." Before I could respond, Julian, his beta, approached our table. Despite his age, I guessed him to be in his 60s, he moved with the fluid grace of a dominant wolf, his silver hair gleaming in the firelight. "Alpha," he addressed Damien before turning to me with a slight bow. "Elena." "May I join you?" Damien nodded, and Julian took a seat across from us, his keen eyes studying me with interest rather than suspicion. "I knew another Omega once. Many years ago," he said without preamble. "She had the same quiet strength I sense in you, the same watchful eyes that see more than others realize." I tensed, uncertain how to respond to such direct personal observation. "Julian was there when I was found," Damien explained. "He knew my mother briefly before she was cast out," Julian finished. "A terrible waste, a terrible shame." His gaze returned to me. "History has a way of offering second chances, though. Opportunities to right old wrongs." "Is that what I am?" I asked, unable to keep a slight edge from my voice. "An opportunity to correct a past mistake?" Julian's eyebrows rose slightly, but I detected a glimmer of approval in his expression. "No, young one. You are your own story, not a rewriting of another." He smiled, the expression warming his austere features. "But perhaps your story can have a different ending." A commotion at the edge of the clearing interrupted our conversation. Heads turned as two wolves burst into the gathering, their expressions urgent as they made straight for Damien. "Alpha!" the taller one called, breathing hard. "Western wolves! A hunting party of 8, crossing our borders." Damien was on his feet instantly, his relaxed demeanor vanishing. "Where?" "Northern Ridge. They're making no attempt to hide their presence." Julian stood as well, his posture shifting to alert readiness. "A challenge? Or a distraction?" Damien said grimly. His eyes found mine. "Stay here. Guards will remain with you and Luna." Fear clawed at my throat. "Damien." "I'll handle this." He cut me off, his tone brooking no argument. To Julian, he said, "Gather the defense squad. No one engages without my command." As they strode away, Lydia appeared at my side, her expression concerned but composed. "Come," she said gently. "Let's get you and Luna back to the safety of the main house." I followed without protest, carrying Luna's basket while 2 guards fell into step behind us. The celebration dissolved into organized movement, as wolves dispersed to defensive positions with practiced efficiency. Inside, Lydia guided me to a different room than before, one deeper within the house, with no windows and a heavy door, a safe room. "Will there be fighting?" I asked as she helped me settle Luna, still miraculously asleep, into a proper cradle. "Perhaps," she answered honestly. "But Damien won't seek it. He prefers words to claws when possible." I paced the small room, guilt and anxiety churning inside me. "This is because of us. They wouldn't be here otherwise." Lydia's expression softened. "Child, this conflict has been brewing for years. The Western Pack has grown increasingly aggressive under Thorne's leadership. Your situation may have accelerated things, but it didn't cause them. But if Luna and I weren't here, then Damien would have found another reason to stand against their cruelty," she interrupted firmly. "He's been waiting for the right moment. Perhaps you were not just seeking sanctuary. Perhaps you were bringing it." Her words gave me pause, offering a perspective I hadn't considered. Not just a burden to be protected, but a catalyst for necessary change. The hours crawled by with no news. Luna woke hungry, and I nursed her, grateful for the distraction her needs provided. Lydia remained with us, her calm presence a comfort in the tense silence. Finally, near dawn, the door opened to reveal Damien. My heart leaped at the sight of him unharmed, though his clothes were dirty and torn in places. His face was grim as he entered, closing the door behind him. "What happened?" I asked, rising to meet him. "The hunting party was indeed a distraction," he said, fatigue evident in his voice. "While our attention was drawn north, 3 of their wolves attempted to breach the southern perimeter. They were seeking you." Cold dread washed through me. "Did they—" "We caught them," he assured me quickly. "No one was seriously hurt. They've been escorted back to their territory with a warning." "A warning won't stop them," I said, voicing what we both knew. "Thorn won't give up." Damien's expression hardened. "No, he won't. Which is why I've called for a council." Lydia gasped softly. "A full alpha council? Damien, that hasn't been convened in decades." "It's time," he said firmly. "This isn't just about Elena and Luna anymore. It's about challenging the entire system that allows Omegas to be discarded when inconvenient. A system that's rotting our kind from within." I stared at him, stunned by the implications. An alpha council meant gathering the leaders of all regional packs, at least a dozen alphas, each with their own territories, traditions, and prejudices. "They won't all stand with you," I said quietly. "Many share Thorn's views on Omegas." "I don't need them all," Damien replied. "Just enough to force change." He ran a hand through his disheveled hair, looking suddenly weary. "The messengers have been sent. The council will convene in 3 days." "And until then?" I asked. His eyes met mine, determination burning through the fatigue. "Until then, we prepare. The next 3 days will determine not just your future and Luna's, but potentially the future of all Omegas among our kind." The weight of his words settled on my shoulders. What had begun as one alpha's unexpected mercy was transforming into something far larger, a challenge to traditions centuries old, a confrontation that could reshape the hierarchy that had defined werewolf society for generations. And somehow, improbably, I stood at the center of it all. Me, an Omega who had been taught her entire life that her only value lay in submission and service. Me, who had been left to die bringing new life into the world. Luna stirred in her cradle, and I went to her, lifting her tiny form against my heart. Her eyes opened, still the cloudy blue of newborns, but with flecks of gold appearing around the edges. Neither fully alpha nor omega, but something new. Something with potential neither pack had seen before. "Rest," Damien said, his voice gentler. "You're safe tonight. Tomorrow we start preparing you for the council." "Preparing me?" I echoed. "I don't understand." He held my gaze steadily. "They need to hear your voice, Elena. Your story. The council must see what I saw in that cabin. An Omega with the heart of an Alpha, with courage that puts many dominant wolves to shame." His words stole my breath, not just for their unexpected praise, but for what they asked of me. To speak before a gathering of the most powerful wolves in the region. To challenge the very system that had shaped my existence. "I don't know if I can," I whispered. Damien stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of deeper gold in his amber eyes. "You can," he said simply. "And you will. Because Luna deserves a world better than the one that rejected her mother." With that, he left us to rest, the door closing softly behind him. I stood motionless, Luna warm against my chest, as dawn light began to filter through the small, high window of our sanctuary. 3 days to prepare for a confrontation that could change everything. 3 days to find a voice I'd been taught never to use. 3 days to become not just a survivor, but perhaps something I'd never imagined possible. An agent of change. The 3 days before the council passed in a blur of preparation. I spent hours with Damien and Julian, learning pack histories, understanding the complex politics between territories, and most importantly, finding my voice. "Tell me again," Damien urged during our final session. pacing the study where we had spent so many hours. "Tell me what happened when you told Thorne about the pregnancy." I swallowed hard, cradling Luna against my shoulder. She was growing stronger daily, more alert, her eyes increasingly flecked with gold. "I went to him privately," I began, the memory still raw despite my attempts to detach from it. As tradition dictated, he had already taken his true mate by then, Serena, the daughter of a neighboring alpha. The match strengthened his position, brought new alliances. I paused, gathering myself. When I told him I carried his child, he denied it was possible. Said I must have lain with another wolf. Julian, seated nearby, made a disgusted sound. Convenient for him. I nodded. When I insisted the child was his, that there had been no one else, he offered me a choice. Terminate the pregnancy or leave the pack. Damien stopped pacing, his expression dark. "And when you refused to terminate?" "He gave me until the full moon to change my mind. When I didn't, his enforcers escorted me to the border. I was told if I returned, they would consider it a hostile act." My voice remained steady, though the pain of the memory still cut deep. "I found the abandoned cabin 2 days later. It became my shelter." Damien's eyes held mine. "And no one from your pack sought you out? No one checked on you, even knowing you were pregnant and alone?" "One did," I admitted. "My childhood friend, Oliver. He brought supplies when he could, though it risked punishment. He stopped coming about a month before Luna was born. I don't know if he was caught or simply decided the risk was too great." "And this is the pack that now demands your return," Julian said, shaking his head. "The audacity is breathtaking. They don't want me," I corrected him. "They want Luna. A half-alpha child is valuable, regardless of how they feel about me." Damien's jaw tightened. "They'll get neither of you." The intensity in his voice stirred something in me, a warmth that had been growing steadily over these past days. I'd tried to ignore it, to focus solely on preparation for the council, but it persisted, this strange connection between us. "You've made remarkable progress," Julian observed, changing the subject. "The council will listen to you, Elena. Your story carries power, if they allow me to speak at all," I countered. "Omegas have no voice in council matters. That's law." Damien's eyes flashed. "Laws can be challenged. Laws can change. And you're willing to risk your position as alpha to change them? For us?" The question had been building in me for days, demanding answer. His gaze never wavered. "For a better future for all our kind. Luna is just the beginning, a symbol of what could be if we move beyond old prejudices." Before I could respond, a knock came at the study door. Lydia entered, her expression grave. "They're arriving," she announced. "The first alphas are crossing our borders now." Damien nodded, his posture straightening almost imperceptibly as he assumed the full mantle of his authority. "Prepare the great hall. Julian, escort our guests to their quarters." As they left to make arrangements, I remained in the study, a flutter of anxiety building in my chest. Damien paused at the door, looking back at me. "Remember," he said quietly, "you are under my protection. No wolf can touch you or Luna without answering to me." The words were meant to reassure, but they highlighted the precariousness of our position. If Damien fell, if his challenge failed, our protection would vanish with him. "I won't let you stand alone," I said impulsively. "Whatever happens in that council, you won't face it alone." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, followed by a warmth I'd rarely seen there. "That works both ways, little Omega." The great hall of the pack house had been transformed by nightfall. A massive circular table dominated the space, with 13 chairs arranged around it, one for each alpha. Behind them, smaller seats accommodated betas and other high-ranking pack members who would observe but not participate directly. I watched from a side chamber as the alphas arrived, each with their entourage, each radiating power in their unique way. Some I recognized from descriptions Damien had provided: the severe female alpha of the mountain pack, known for her tactical brilliance; the elderly but still formidable alpha of the river territories, whose pack had maintained peaceful relations with humans for generations; the twin alphas of the divided forests, who shared leadership through an arrangement unique among our kind. And then, like a shadow falling across the room, Thorne entered, my former alpha, the father of my child. He looked exactly as I remembered. Tall and imposing, with dark hair and the cold, calculated charm that had once fooled me into believing his interest was genuine. Beside him walked his mate, Serena, her sleek form and perfect features, a stark reminder of everything I was not. Damien appeared at my side, his presence immediately steadying. "Are you ready?" I clutched Luna closer, drawing strength from her warmth, as ready as I'll ever be. He placed his hand on the small of my back, a gesture that had become familiar over the past days, grounding and protective. "Stay close to me. Speak only when I indicate. And remember, I am not alone," I finished softly. "Neither are you." The ghost of a smile touched his lips, before his expression returned to the impassive mask required for the council. Together, we entered the great hall. The reaction to our appearance was immediate. Heads turning, conversations halting, a wave of whispers sweeping through the gathered wolves. Thorn's eyes found me instantly, narrowing with cold fury when they dropped to Luna in my arms. Beside him, Serena's perfect features twisted with disdain. Damien guided me to a position behind his chair at the table, a clear statement that while I was not seated as an equal, I was present with his full endorsement. Julian took his place beside me, a reassuring presence at my back. "Brothers and sisters," Damien addressed the gathering, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "I welcome you to Eastern Territory for this Alpha Council. It has been too long since we gathered thus, perhaps because such gatherings are typically reserved for matters of genuine importance." Thorn interjected, his tone just shy of open disrespect. "Not domestic disputes over strays." A few chuckles followed his words, but others around the table remained stone-faced, watching the exchange with careful neutrality. Damien's expression didn't change. "If you consider the systematic mistreatment of Omegas a domestic dispute, Thorn, then we have identified the problem more quickly than I anticipated." The Mountain Alpha, Vivian, I recalled, leaned forward. "Let's be clear about why we're here. You've claimed an Omega and her child from the Western Pack. Thorn demands their return. On the surface, this is indeed a territorial dispute, which could be settled between the two of you." Her sharp eyes assessed me briefly. "Yet you've called a full council. Why?" "Because this case exposes a cancer growing among our kind," Damien replied evenly. "A belief that Omegas are property to be discarded when inconvenient, that they have no rights beyond what Alphas deign to grant them." His gaze swept the table. "I believe this thinking weakens us all and must be challenged." Murmurs rippled through the hall, some supportive, others clearly opposed. "Pretty words," Thorn said dismissively. "But pack law is clear. The Omega belongs to the pack of her birth unless formally released or claimed through proper channels. You stole what was mine, yours." Damien's voice remained controlled, but I could sense the anger beneath. "You rejected her, left her to die in labor. By the oldest laws of our kind, she was abandoned. Fair claim for any who found her. Rejection is a pack's right," countered an Alpha I didn't recognize, a heavy-set man with a cropped beard. "Alphas must be able to remove elements that threaten pack harmony." "And how exactly," Julian spoke up from behind me, "does a pregnant Omega threaten pack harmony?" Thorn's cold eyes focused on Luna. "The child is the issue, a half-alpha, half-omega abomination that could destabilize pack hierarchy. Such things have consequences beyond what a female Omega could understand." I felt Damien tense beside me, but before he could respond, the elderly River Alpha raised his hand. "I would hear from the Omega herself," he said, his voice thin but commanding. "If we are to debate her fate, let her speak." A shocked silence fell over the hall. Omegas did not address Alpha councils. It simply wasn't done. Damien turned to me, a silent question in his eyes. I gave a slight nod, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "The council recognizes Elena of the Eastern Pack," Damien announced, defying tradition with those simple words. I stepped forward, Luna secure in my arms. My voice shook slightly as I began, but steadied with each word. "I stand before you not as a possession to be claimed or discarded, but as a wolf with the right to choose her own path, For too long, our kind has wasted the gifts Omegas bring, treating us as lesser beings when we could be partners in building stronger packs. I turned my gaze directly to Thorn, refusing to cower before him. You speak of pack harmony, but what harmony exists in cruelty? In abandoning a pregnant wolf to die alone? In denying your own child because she might not fit neatly into your plans? Thorn's face darkened with rage. You forget your place, my place, I interrupted, surprising even myself with my boldness, is wherever I choose to make it, with wolves who value rather than despise me, who see Luna as a gift rather than a threat. The mountain alpha was watching me with newfound interest. The child shows alpha traits? I nodded. Yes, like another Omega's child once did. My eyes found Damien's, a child who grew to become one of the strongest alphas among us. A ripple of shock moved through the council as understanding dawned. Damien had never hidden his origins, but neither had they been widely discussed outside his pack. Impossible, Thorn scoffed. No Omega's offspring could— I am living proof that you are wrong. Damien cut him off, rising to stand beside me. My mother was an Omega, cast out while carrying me. She died so that I might live. A sacrifice no wolf should have to make. His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining in full view of the council. Elena and Luna came to us nearly broken, but with spirits undefeated. They have earned their place among the Eastern Pack. They have earned the right to choose their own destiny. The twin alphas exchanged glances before one of them spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Damien? That we overthrow centuries of pack law regarding Omegas? I propose we evolve, Damien answered. That we recognize Omegas as full members of our society, with the right to choose their pack affiliations, to raise their children, to contribute according to their abilities rather than arbitrary designations. Madness, Thorn snarled. Next, you'll suggest they lead packs. Why not? The mountain alpha mused, surprising everyone. If they prove capable, our traditions have wisdom, but also blind spots. Perhaps it's time we examined them more critically. Debate erupted around the table. Heated arguments, thoughtful questions, centuries of tradition clashing with the possibility of change. Through it all, Damien's hand remained firmly clasped with mine, a united front before the storm of opposition and support swirling around us. Hours passed. Luna, miraculously, remained calm throughout, as if somehow understanding the importance of this moment to her future. When she finally began to fuss, I prepared to withdraw. But Damien shook his head. Stay, he said quietly. Let them see what they're truly deciding upon. A mother and child, not abstract principles, so I remained, nursing Luna quietly when she needed it, facing the stares and whispers with a dignity I'd never known I possessed. Finally, as night deepened toward dawn, the elderly River Alpha called for resolution. We have heard enough, he declared. The matter before us has expanded beyond a simple territorial dispute to questions that touch the very foundation of our society. His rheumy eyes scanned the gathered alphas. I propose a vote, not to settle the specific case of Elena and her child that has already been decided by Alpha Damien's claim, but rather to establish new principles regarding the treatment of Omegas throughout all territories. One by one, the alphas voted. Some, like Thorn, vehemently opposed any change. Others supported limited reforms. A few, more than I had dared hope, stood fully with Damien's vision. When the final count was made, the council stood divided, but with a clear majority. 8 alphas for reform, 5 against. Not unanimous, but enough. It is decided, the River Alpha announced. Each pack will implement these changes according to their own customs, but the principle is established. Omegas are to be recognized as full pack members with rights of choice and protection under law. Any alpha who continues practices of abandonment or forced breeding will answer to this council. His gaze rested briefly on Thorn, whose face had darkened to a dangerous shade. The specific case of Elena and Luna is confirmed as settled. They belong to the Eastern Pack by right of claim and choice. The formality of the announcement couldn't mask the monumental nature of what had just occurred. Centuries of hierarchy had been challenged. The first steps toward genuine change had been taken. As the council disbanded, Thorn approached us, his rage barely contained. "This isn't over," he warned, his voice low enough that only Damien and I could hear. "The Western Pack will never accept these reforms." Damien's posture shifted subtly, placing himself more fully between Thorn and me. "Then the Western Pack will find itself increasingly isolated. The world is changing, Thorn. Adapt or be left behind." Thorn's eyes found mine one last time, cold hatred in their depths. "You'll regret this rebellion, Omega. Both of you will." With that, he turned and stalked away, his entourage following quickly. "He'll cause trouble," I murmured as we watched him leave. "Undoubtedly," Damien agreed, "but not today. Today we've won something precious." He looked down at Luna, then back to me. A chance for a different future. The council departure took hours, each alpha leaving with their retinue according to strict protocols of precedence. By mid-morning, only the Eastern Pack remained, a sense of weary triumph settling over us all. Julian approached, satisfaction evident in his lined face. "Well fought," he told Damien before turning to me with a small bow. "And well spoken, Elena. You honor your daughter with your courage." After he left us, Damien guided me through the great hall's side door into a small garden I hadn't seen before. A peaceful sanctuary of stone paths and autumn flowers sheltered from the wind by high walls. "My mother's garden," he explained as I looked around in wonder. Or so I'm told. The former alpha created it in her memory. I settled on a bench, adjusting Luna in my arms. She was sleeping again, peaceful despite the momentous changes that had just reshaped her future. "What happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that had hovered at the edges of my mind throughout the council. Damien sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, yet still maintaining a careful space between us. "Now," he said thoughtfully, "we begin the real work. Changing laws is one thing, changing hearts and minds is quite another." "There will be resistance," I observed. "Not just from Thorn." "Yes." He didn't sugarcoat the challenges ahead. "But there will also be support, more than either of us might have expected." Change was already brewing. We simply brought it to the surface. We sat in companionable silence for a moment, the garden peaceful around us, the morning sun warm on our faces. "You asked me once why I risked so much for you and Luna," Damien said finally, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I gave you reasons of justice, of righting historical wrongs. Those were true, but incomplete." I turned to him, curious. What was the complete reason? His amber eyes met mine, something vulnerable visible in their depths for the first time. "From the moment I found you in that cabin, fighting to bring Luna into the world despite everything stacked against you, I recognized something in you that called to me, a spirit that refused to be broken, a heart that remained capable of love despite cruelty." His hand found mine again, our fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. "Wolves like us, who have known rejection, who have survived abandonment, we recognize each other. We belong together." My heart stuttered at his words, at the naked truth in his eyes. "As Pack?" I asked, needing to be certain of his meaning. A smile touched his lips, not the ghost of one I'd glimpsed before, but full and genuine, transforming his severe features. "As Pack, yes, but also, if you choose it, as more." His free hand gently touched Luna's sleeping head. "You've had too many choices taken from you. This one must be truly yours, made in freedom, not gratitude or necessity." Tears pricked at my eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of something I hadn't felt in so long I barely recognized it. Hope. Possibility. A future not dictated by rigid hierarchy and ancient prejudice, but one I could help shape. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You don't need to say anything yet," he assured me. "We have time. For the first time, perhaps, we both have the luxury of choice." Luna stirred in my arms, her tiny face turning toward Damien as if sensing his presence. When her eyes fluttered open, the golden flecks seemed brighter, more defined against the newborn blue. "She knows you," I said softly, watching as her small hand reached toward him. Without hesitation, Damien offered his finger, which Luna grasped with surprising strength. The simple gesture, This powerful alpha, allowing himself to be held by a newborn, moved something deep within me. "She's extraordinary," Damien murmured, watching Luna with undisguised wonder. Like her mother. In that moment, surrounded by the garden created for another Omega who had never lived to see her child grow, I made a silent promise to my daughter. She would know a different world than I had known. She would grow strong in her unique nature, neither defined by her alpha traits nor limited by her Omega heritage. She would have choices I had never dreamed possible. And perhaps, I thought as I looked at Damien, at the strength and gentleness united in him, at the vision he fought for despite overwhelming odds, perhaps we would build that world together. Not as Alpha and Omega bound by ancient hierarchy, but as equals united by something more powerful: respect, understanding, and the beginning glimmers of love. The garden around us blazed with autumn colors, the dying year preparing for winter sleep. But for us, for Luna, for Damien, for me, this ending was merely a beginning, a new season, full of possibility and promise. For the first time in my life, I looked toward the future not with fear,